Welcome back, troops. Let's tab 59. Cracking day again. So, I've done a video a while back about the transition from corporal in the British Army to sergeant in the British Army. And I spoke about the course you need to do if you're in a rifle platoon in the British Infantry. And then I spoke a little bit about the transitioning into life in the sergeant's mess, the warrant officers and sergeant's mess. And I thought today I'd just expand on the sergeant's mess side, the warrant officers and sergeant's mess side of life. So like I say, I touched on it, but I also want to expand on that a little bit. So first of all, I'm going to talk about dress. Now, I spoke before about mess dress, and that back in the day when you got promoted to sergeant, you had to purchase that yourself at your own expense. Now there is a grant, I don't know how much it is, but you do get some money towards your mess dress. Obviously that's just for you, the mess member, not for your other half of your guests. Now I know that if you get promoted and you haven't got your mess dress yet, and you attend a formal mess dinner night where the dress criteria for the mess members is mess dress, and you don't have it, if you haven't purchased it yet, or you're waiting to get it tailored or whatever, then you'll attend in number 2 dress, FAD, future army dress, second best khaki dress uniform. That's what you would wear in the sergeant's mess if you don't have mess dress, and you'll get away with that for a time, but it is frowned upon, and you'll be expected to get your mess dress. So your guests, if it's a formal mess night, if you're taking your wife or girlfriend, not both obviously, then they'll be expected to be dressed appropriately as well, evening dress. Now it does vary slightly between messes, but as a rule of thumb, if you like, they don't like your female guests to have bare shoulders at the dinner table. So if you've got a sort of strapless dress on, they'll want them to wear a shawl around their shoulders while they're sat at the table. Maybe after the meal, when you dress into the bar area, you move into there and there's a bit of a disco or a band on or something, a dance on, then I'm sure you can relax a bit and you can remove the shawl off the shoulders. But while you're sat at the table, you're expected to cover that. They also don't want too much cleavage. A little bit's fine, but they don't want you hanging out your dress, unfortunately. And of course, the length of the dress. Most messes, not all, most messes like it certainly below the knee when you're sat down, and most prefer it to go a bit lower than that, down towards the ankles. So it's quite old-fashioned traditional. Now I'll say, it's not every mess is the same. Each mess will have its own rules, but as a standard, the rule of thumb, that's what I expect. Shoulders covered, not too much cleavage, and the length of the dress for a formal dinner night, down below the knees when you're seated. So it might be below your knees when you stood up. When you're seated down, it shouldn't rise up above your knees. And they prefer it to go down towards the ankles. Now there's other functions besides. I'm talking about a formal mess dinner night, a ladies' dinner night, it could be a Burns night, whatever. That's the dress they expect. Other functions you have in the mess, there may be a themed night where it's fancy dress, or a casino night where it's not a formal dinner night, and then the dress criteria will be slightly different. The men might not, not the men, the serving soldiers, the sergeants, warrant officers, they might not have to wear mess dress. They might be allowed to wear a lounge suit, for instance. So that's the sort of dress criteria. Of course, if you take any other guests, you may not take just your wife or girlfriend to the mess. You may take your mother and father, or your brother and sister, or something like that. You're responsible for them being dressed correctly. And while we're on that subject, any guest you're taking, whether it's your partner, or whether it's somebody else, a guest that you're taking along, take along a mate or whatever, their behaviour, your guest's behaviour is down to you. If they cause a scene or some sort of upset, then you're going to be the one that's looked at to grip it. And if you don't grip it and sort it out there and then, you'll certainly get it in the neck after the dinner night when you get called in front of the RSM to explain your guest's behaviour or your behaviour. So you've got to be on the ball, you've got to watch yourself and watch who you take and think about that. So he's a little bit snotty-nosed, I know, but that's just the mess traditions, that's part and parcel of it, and that's what you have to accept. So this video, really, what I'm doing now, I suppose I'm talking to people that might be interested in what goes on in a warrant officers and sergeants mess that has no idea of that, no connection with the military, or never been into a sergeant's mess. But also for the old and bold out there, people that have served in the army and been a mess member, and maybe it just brings back a few memories and you can sort of relate to some of the stuff I'm saying. So that's the sort of dress code, you've got to watch that. Every mess, when you join a mess, every mess will have a set of mess rules available. I think mainly now they're online, on the internet, but there should be a hard copy, a booklet, somewhere in the mess, and it's really worth making sure you got hold of that and you really read and digest it. And as I say, each function you attend could be slightly different, certainly with the dress format, so watch out for that. So what happens on a formal dinner night? Well, you'll know one's coming up, you'll be notified via a mess meeting, or a minutes will come round, a diary, a calendar, whatever, so you'll know when it's going to happen. You'll know what time you've got to be there at the sergeant's mess and what dress you've got to be in, etc. So a formal ladies' dinner night, hopefully you've got a partner to go along with, you're in the right dress, you turn up at the correct time, and as you enter the sergeant's mess, there should be a welcoming drink in the foyer area maybe, or as you come into the bar. There should be a table of drinks. There'll be a soft drink option, but it might be like a small glass of fizzy champagne or fizzy wine or whatever. Or it could be a sherry, Depends on the function. So you get your welcome drink, and then you'll go through to the bar areas. And somewhere in that, near where the welcome drinks are, there should be a big board up with a seating plan, clearly printed out. Now, obviously you've got to have a quick look at that, make sure you know where you're going to be sitting in the table setup, and just bear that in mind. That's the idea of welcome drinks, it's to stop you there, so you grab a drink at the same time, look at the big board and see the seating plan. You'll go through to the bar and you'll circulate, and you can buy a pint, and you don't have to drink your sherry, you can grab a pint or whatever you want to drink for you and your guest, and you're allowed to take those drinks when dinner is called through to the mess, normally to the formal dinner night. So you get your drinks and you're milling about. Then at some stage, a mess steward, probably one of the staff members, will come through and make an announcement. Some regiments blow a bugle, some bang a gong, all sorts of different traditions, different regiments. But some form of notification will be given to you that it's time to take your place at the table for dinner. So off you go. What will happen normally again, remember these are general, every mess is slightly different, but normally what happens is you'll all go through and find your table, your seating place, but you don't sit down, you stand behind your chair at the place by your table with your partner or guest or whatever. You'll then wait for the top table to come through. So the top table is, like I said before in the previous video, the Regimental Sergeant Major, the PMC, the RQMS, a lot of the other sergeant majors, any top guests, like you might have an officer with you, you might even have the CO there, you might be invited. They all come through and you remain standing behind your chair until they've come through and taken their place at the top table behind their chair stood up. Now we come to what happens next. I mentioned before you have the most junior, newly promoted sergeant in the mess will be acting as Mr. Vice, or it's a female, Madam Vice. Let's say Mr. Vice to keep it simple. So Mr. Vice, the junior member, he's sat right at the bottom leg of one of the tables. He can have his partner with him, but he'll be sat at the end of the table. Once they're all ready, the RSM or the PMC will say, Mr. Vice, grace. And then Mr. Vice will be expected to say grace, whatever that might be. He might be given, or she might be given that, what to say for grace, or you may be expected to come up with your own words. So just keep it simple, don't you? For what we're about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful, amen. Something like that. Just grace is said, and then you'll see the top table take their places. The gentleman will pull out the chair for his guest, his female guest, and she'll sit and then he'll sit. And then once the top table do that, everybody sits down. So once you're all seated, there's a bit of background talking. You may even have some sort of band, or I've seen all sorts in the corner playing a bit of background music. Everyone's chatting away. And then the food should be served, unless normally the RSM will want to stand up and welcome everybody to the mess and give you an outline of the format of the evening, maybe even. But then eventually your starters will come out, the wine waiters will come out, off your wine. Now, I come from a very basic background, growing up in the 60s and 70s. I was fish fingers and chips bloke growing up in my house, so I didn't have a clue about posh dining. And I suppose it isn't that posh, but to me it was when I went in there. So I didn't know which knife and fork, which glass for what, I didn't have a clue. You will have on your table a white wine glass and a red wine glass maybe, and you may have even brought a drink through from the bar with you. But you'll also have a small stemmed glass, like a sherry glass, which is for later on for your port. That'll be there. So you're having your drinks, the starters brought out. Normally what happens is the mess staff are very good, they're very swift. Several of them will come out and start serving the starters. It's the right etiquette to not start eating that starter until you see the top table start eating theirs. They normally try to wait till the top table will be looking, and when they see that everybody's got their starter in front of them, they'll start to eat theirs, and then everyone starts to eat together. And you're just chatting away and having your starter. Now, some tips. When you take your place at the table, where your placemat is, there'll be a small card with your name and rank on it. 002 Smith or whatever it is. And Mrs. Smith's card will be next to it, and so on. Everyone's got these little paper cards, a little card with your name on it. Hang on to that. You old and bold out there, you know what I'm on about, because there's an old thing in the army that somebody will pick your card up, your nameplate card, and they'll stick it in their pocket. And at some stage during the evening, they'll get a biro pen and they'll write something on it. Something cheeky, something jokey, and they'll pass it up the table, and it'll get passed all the way up to the top table where the PMC and the RSM will get them. And they could be read out later on in the evening after dinner. All sorts of cheeky things get written on there, so be careful with that. I've seen some funny ones, I won't go into them. So you're having your meal. Oh, another thing, don't touch the silver. There will be silverware on the table. So there'll be silver candelabras, there might be some trophies or cups that the battalion's won or Sergeant's Mess has won. There could be figurines, a soldier on horseback from a famous battle or something. There will be pieces of silver dotted along the table. Don't touch the silver. The silver is taboo, you don't touch it. Look at it, but don't grab it and pass it to your mate to look at, or let them touch him. Nobody touches the silver. So after your starter, your wine waiters are coming in, they'll keep topping you up with wine. Then your main course, how many courses you're going to have, that'll go on and on and on. Now back in the old days, once you'd sat down for your starter, you weren't allowed to leave that table until the meal was finished, or if the PFC or the RSM gave permission for what they used to call a comfort break. If you left your meal back in the day, if you stood up to go to the toilet and walked out while the meal's going on, without a reasonable excuse, you would get a port fine. So port later on comes at the end of the meal, and the port is included in the meal price. And there's plenty of it, decanters of port going round. But what they'll do is, if you have a misdemeanour, you touch a silver, or you do something wrong, you send something stupid up, you will get a port fine. At the end of the evening, the RSM will read out, Sergeant Smith, 1 bottle of port for getting the grace wrong, or whatever. So be aware of that, port fines. But yeah, leaving the table. Nowadays, they can't do that. It's a human right to go through a weed. And if you have to go, you have to go. But just be aware of it. It should be controlled properly, and at certain parts throughout the evening, 'cause it's quite a long process, the dinner, the RSM or the PMC should bang a gavel and announce a 5-10 minute comfort break. Now, obviously everyone rushes to the toilet to empty their bladders. We do get people go outside for a crafty fag, or even nip to the bar and get an extra drink or something, I don't know. But you don't have long. Go to the toilet, do what you got to do, and get back to your table. It's also etiquette. If you're at the table and your other half, your guest, especially if it's a female guest, is still not back yet, when she comes back, or the guest near you comes back, if it's a lady, you should stand yourself up while they sit down and sit yourself. It's just an old gentleman's thing. It is old, it's old tradition. Maybe it's outdated today, I don't know. But that's what used to happen, and I'm sure a certain amount of that still goes on. So bear those sort of etiquette and bit of tradition, bear those in mind. So, end of the dinner night. End of the dinner night. It's not the end of the dinner night. You get to your dessert, you finish your dessert. Then what will happen is the staff will come and clear the tables of everything apart from the silver. The silver remains. The placemats go, it all goes. All that should be left on your table is the silver and your port glass, and everyone else's port glass. That will be left on the table. Once that's done, the port will come out and is passed. It's always passed to the left. If you've got a guest with you, it should be sat on your left. You'll receive the port, charge their glass with port, then charge yours, and then pass it down to the left, and so on. Once everybody's glass is charged with port, there's several decanters knocking about, gavel will bang, and the toasts will start. Now, it depends on the particular function you're having, how many toasts there can be. If it's a ladies' dinner night, there'll be a toast to the ladies. The first toast is normally to the king, the monarch at the time. In my day, it's the queen. So what will happen is the gavel will bang, PMC will bang that. He will say, Mr. Vice, the king. What happens then is Mr. Vice stands up, picks up his glass, everybody stands up. Mr. Vice then says, sirs, ladies and gentlemen, the Queen. Now there's different types of loyal toasts in a way. Normally, most regiments all take a sip of the port at the same time. They'll all say, the King, and take a sip. And then, as everyone sits back down again. Some regiments do a loyal toast where each individual, it's like a Mexican wave, toasts the monarch. So, first guy will say, the King, takes a sip, the next person, the king, and so it goes around the table till everyone's said individually. And I think the loyal toast goes back to where if people weren't loyal, when the toast was happening, they could hold their glass up and say, stuff the Queen, or something like that. They could murmur or not say it. So it was done individually to show your loyalty on the toast. So you toast the King first, and then you sit back down, carry on nattering, port's coming round, topping your glasses up. Keep your glass topped up, don't neck it, because there's more toast to come. So you've had the toast to the monarch, the Queen, the King rather. The next toast might be the regiment, or it could be just to the ladies, to our guests, and that's when you stand up, your female guests remain seated, and you take a toast to them. So it depends on how many toasts, depends on what the function's doing and what your regimental traditions are. My regiment, for instance, the Princess of Wales' Royal Regiment, we don't stand up to toast. We don't stand up to toast the King. We didn't stand up to toast the Queen. We remain seated for that. And it goes back to them being Villiers Marines, and they'd be on board ship and they wouldn't better stand up because they'd bang the head. So everyone remains seated for that toast. But most regiments stand for the loyal toast, or the King's toast. So toasts go on, and once the last toast is finished, what will happen then is the mess staff will bring out coffee, and they'll bring out a cheese board and biscuits and that, and plates and everything else. And you'll sit there drinking coffee, still drink port's still going round if there's any left, and you have your cheese and biscuits. And that is at that stage that any speeches will come out. And there's always going to be a speech, even if it's just the RSM having a bit of a speech about whatever. It's up to him to write that. Or it could be somebody leaving, or more than one person could actually be leaving that night, a presentation night. So W02 Brown is leaving, and the RSM will stand up and say something about Sergeant Brown, and then they will present him with his presentation for leaving the mess, or whether he's leaving the army, depends what he's doing. They'll give him some gift to leave, and then he may say a few words as well. Once all the speeches are done, that's it. You'll be able to get up from the table and go through to the bar where the evening carries on. It could be a band, there could be a discotheque, whatever. Discotheque, that's how old I am. Ooh, contact went out. So that's not the end of the night, but it's the end of the formal dinner. So now you're in the bar area, a bit more relaxed, a bit of dancing going on, whatever. And that could go on till the wee hours. How do you leave the mess? Well, you can't just have your dinner, go through to the bar and think, that's me, I'm going home, I'm knackered or whatever. You can't do that. You have to, it's expected of you to stay in the bar for at least a short time. If you want to leave the mess and the RSM and any guests that he has are still there, then you need to ask permission to leave and give a reason. And the best thing to do is to do that before the actual function. Hi there. So if you need to get back for a babysitter or let the dog out or whatever, have a quiet word with the PMC or the RSM before you go through to say, sir, I've got to get away at so-and-so time because of this reason, and that should be fine. But even then, before you leave, make sure you and your guests go over to the RSM and say your thanks for tonight, sir, we've got to leave now, as you know, blah, blah. It's just etiquette again. If the RSM's gone, you're still hanging on. If you want to leave and you're a sergeant or colour sergeant, if there's somebody of higher rank in the bar, whoever's the highest, most senior person in the bar at the time, it's always polite to go and tip your hat to them before you leave, not just disappear. Later on, the night gets a bit shoddy, everyone just dissipates anyway. But it's a bit of etiquette just to tip your hat and say goodbye. That's roughly, now there's a lot more in it than that, but that's just an outline. I could waffle on for ages, but I'm not going to. That's just an outline of the mess dinner night and how it sort of runs for a formal dinner night. As I say, there's lots of other functions that happen. Remember I mentioned the place cards with your name on it? If you haven't kept hold of that, when the toasts are all done and the RSM gets up to do his bit, he may well have selected a few of these and read your messages out. It's all a bit tongue-in-cheek fun. Keep them reasonably clean. It's a bit of a laugh. The RSM will censor which ones he wants to read out anyway. So that's a formal dinner night in a bit of a condensed version of it, in a nutshell. Be a gentleman, look after your guests, make sure your guests know what's expected of them. That's pretty much it. It is a bit of fun. It sounds a bit pompous and a bit old-fashioned, a bit true, but that is part of the British military. We've got these traditions, certainly in battalions, and I say some of the other regiments. Every regiment's got its own quirks, and being in that regiment, you'll know. Now, before you go your first dinner night as Mr. Vice, your first mess function, go right back to the beginning now. Before you go, you will get called in to see the RSM to get a briefing on what's expected of you at your first dinner night. Certainly as Mr. Vice, you'll get a briefing. If not the RSM, then maybe the PMC or another senior sergeant major. Somebody will give you a briefing of what's expected literally just before the dinner night, maybe the day before, so you've got an idea. And of course, you know, you're a senior corporal before that, so you may have been in your own corporal's mess and had an idea. You'll also have chatted to sergeants that you know, and they'll give you a bit of a briefing on stuff. Sometimes, as Mr. Vice, there's tricks played on you. I've seen people put talc powder, or like Fuller's Earth, inside the napkin, so that when Mr. Vice picks his napkin up to lay out on his legs, it's talc powder goes everywhere. I've seen it where they've rigged up fishing line to his cutlery and to his chair, so when Mr. Vice pulls his chair out to sit down, his cutlery shoots off the table. I've seen all that sort of detail. So before I go, I'm going to tell you one of many. I've got many little stories to tell you about dining in the sergeant's mess, but I'll try and keep this one, pick one that's fairly clean, so I'll tell you this one. And there's no names from me, no Pactor, if anyone's watching that remembers this. I was at a mess function. I was a W01. I was sat at the top table. I didn't have anybody with me, a guest with me. It was a ladies' night, but I was alone. Sat on the top table with the GSM, actually. I was at a garrison mess with the garrison sergeant major and some other sergeant majors. Lovely dinner night, just kicking off. My first one actually in this mess. I just got there. So we're having this dinner night, and down one of the legs of the table there was a sergeant, youngish sergeant, and he had his wife with him, and it was a Saturday night, and he was an avid lottery man. He liked to do the lottery religiously, same numbers every week. He grabbed hold of the wine waiter and said, listen, son, make sure you find out the lottery numbers tonight, and when the numbers come out, come up to me with a bit of paper and just slip me the numbers so I know what number, you know, might have won the lottery. His wife, the guy's wife, then intercepted the wine waiter and gave the wine waiter her husband's numbers, in the hope that it'd be a good prank, that when the wine waiter comes round, slips her husband the numbers, he'll see that it's his numbers and he'll think he's won the lottery. It was a bit of a joke, but it backfired. So the night goes on. None of us knew about this. We were all up the top table. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't have a clue about this. So the numbers must have come out. The wine waiter goes up to this sergeant with the sergeant's numbers on a bit of paper. Says, there you go, sir. There's your numbers. Of course, the sergeant looks down, looks at the numbers, and he can't believe it. He stood up at the mess function and went, yes! Yes! It was a big win. It was like £30 million or something. He thought he'd won. He stood up like that. Look, he'd scored a goal at Wembley. Yes! Of course, his wife's gone, darling, what is it? He goes, you fat cow. You can do one. I've been knocking your sister off for the last 2 years. Well, that kicked off big time. He was out the mess. She was out the mess. It was chaos. I mean, a lot of us were laughing, but I did feel for them both, especially for her. But things do happen in messes. I've seen fights. I've seen all sorts over the years. I was a mess member for a long time. And it is really, you've got to watch yourself. You've got to watch your P's and Q's. You've got to play the game, because that's all it is. There's people acting posh that ain't posh, because I certainly weren't posh. But you've got to go with it. It's all part of being a warrant officer or a sergeant. It's all part of being in the army at that level. And it can have a lot of fun. It can be very enjoyable. So there you go. A little bit of a chat about the mess. I hope it's not been too boring. Let me know, you old and bold, let me know a few anecdotes, things you've seen happen in the sergeant's mess, especially if it's a posh formal dinner. Some of the stuff that happens. You could write a book on it, couldn't you? Anyway, troops, if you're new to my channel, you're watching this for the first time, you've not subscribed to me, please consider it. I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider it, because it'll help me grow the channel. It's doing all right at the moment. Till the next time, stay safe. Remember, let's tab.